Riots in Portland continue. Working poor unite! Our owners are feeling the heat. Federal law enforcement use unmarked vehicles to grab protesters off Portland streets. In the early hours of July 15th, after a night spent protesting at the Multnomah County Justice Center and Mark O. Hatfield Federal Courthouse, Mark Pettibone and his friend Connor O'Shea decided to head home. It had been a calm night compared to most protesting downtown. By 2 a.m., law enforcement hadn't used any tear gas, and with only a few exceptions, both the Portland Police Bureau and federal law enforcement officers had stayed out of sight. A block west of Chapman Square, Pettibone and O'Shea bumped into a group of people who warned them that people in camouflage were driving around the area in unmarked minivans, grabbing people off the street. So that was terrifying to hear, Pettibone said. They had barely made it half a block when an unmarked minivan pulled up in front of them. "I see guys in camo," O'Shea said. 4 or 5 of them pop out, open the door, and it was just like, oh shit, I don't know who you are or what you want with us. Federal law enforcement officers have been using unmarked vehicles to drive around downtown Portland and detain protesters since at least July 14th. Personal accounts and multiple videos posted online show the officers driving up to people, detaining individuals with no explanation of why they are being arrested, and driving off. The tactic appears to be another escalation in federal force deployed on Portland city streets, as federal officials and President Donald Trump have said they plan to quell nightly protests outside the federal courthouse and Multnomah County Justice Center that have lasted for more than 6 weeks. So the pressure is on in Portland. The point of the protests has been to protest George Floyd's murder. That is the pressure point. But we have to recognize that George Floyd was not only a black person. George Floyd was a poor person. This is class war. If white people are willing to stand in solidarity with black people, then comfortable people ought to be willing to stand in solidarity with poor people. So if you're a comfortable white person protesting in Portland, Oregon, you're a hero, not only because you're protesting unfair racial tactics, but also unfair class tactics. The system is designed to keep not only black people in their places, but poor people in their places. Our owners are obviously feeling the heat, so we need to keep this pressure going. Not only do we need to keep going until we defund the police, we need to keep going until we get Medicare for all, COVID relief payments, fair wages, a green jobs guarantee, and so forth. Eventually, we need to say, no wars, no more bombing the shit out of people in other countries. We need to stick together on all those demands. And working poor people and their allies need to be making those demands. The feds are very threatened by the sticking together, by the solidarity. They crack down in the same way with Occupy. We live in a police state. We live in fascism. And it's not just Trump fascism. It's United States fascism. Both parties are working together to oppress workers. They've been doing this for more than 40 years. If we're going to stick together to get workers what they need, then we're going to need to stick together this way. As long as the feds are this bothered by what we're doing, then we know we're on the right track. Federal officers have charged at least 13 people with crimes related to the protests so far, while others have been arrested and released, including Pettibone. They also left one demonstrator hospitalized with skull fractures after shooting him in the face with so-called less lethal munitions July 11th. Officers from the U.S. Marshals Special Operations Group and Customs and Border Protection's BORTAC have been sent to Portland to protect federal property during the recent protests against racism and police brutality. They're not trying to protect federal property, they're trying to keep the slaves from rising up against their masters. But interviews conducted by Oregon Public Broadcasting show officers are also detaining people on Portland streets who aren't near federal property, nor is it clear that all of the people being arrested have engaged in criminal activity. Demonstrators like O'Shea and Pettibone said they think they were targeted by federal officers for simply wearing black clothing in the area of the demonstration. O'Shea said he ran when he saw people wearing camouflage jump out of an unmarked vehicle. He said he hid when a second unmarked van pursued him. Video shot by O'Shea and provided to Oregon Public Broadcasting shows a dark screen as O'Shea narrates the scene. Metadata from the video confirms the time and place of the protesters' account. Feds are driving around, grabbing people off the streets, O'Shea said on the video. I didn't do anything fucking wrong. I'm recording this. I had to let somebody know that this is what happens. Pettibone did not escape the federal officers. I am basically tossed into the van, Pettibone said, and I had my beanie pulled over my face so I couldn't see, and they held my hands over my head. Pettibone and O'Shea both said they couldn't think of anything they might have done to end up targeted by law enforcement. They attend protests regularly, but they said they aren't instigators. They don't spray paint buildings, shine laser pointers at officers, or do anything else other than attend protests, which law enforcement have regularly deemed unlawful assemblies. Yes, we live in a police state. The First Amendment is supposed to protect these assemblies. You have owners. They own you. And they don't like it when you protest their ownership. The only way we're going to get out of this mess is to take our owners clear the fuck out of power. And we're not going to do that by voting. These lawful protests and our documentation of them are the only hope we have. If we're going to escape the blatant fascism we're living in now, that's our only chance. Blinded by his hat in an unmarked minivan full of armed people dressed in camouflage and body armor who hadn't identified themselves, Pettibone said he was driven around downtown before being unloaded inside a building. He wouldn't learn until after his release that he had been inside the federal courthouse. It was basically a process of facing many walls and corners as they patted me down and took my picture and rummaged through my belongings, Pettibone said. One of them said, "This is a whole lot of nothing." Pettibone said he was put into a cell. Soon after, 2 officers came in to read him his Miranda rights. They didn't tell him why he was being arrested. He said they asked him if he wanted to waive his rights and answer some questions, but Pettibone declined and said he wanted a lawyer. The interview was terminated, and about 90 minutes later he was released. He said he did not receive any paperwork, citation, or record of his arrest. I just happened to be wearing black on a sidewalk in downtown Portland at the time, Pettibone said, and that apparently is grounds for detaining me. In a statement, the U.S. Marshals Service declined to comment on the practice of using unmarked vehicles, but said their officers had not arrested Pettibone. All United States Marshals Service arrestees have public records of arrest documenting their charges. Our agency did not arrest or detain Mark James Pettibone. So they're just fucking lying to us. These are fucking bleak times we live in, people. Oregon Public Broadcasting sent DHS an extensive list of questions about Pettibone's arrest, including, what is the legal justification for making arrests away from federal property? What is the legal justification for searching people who are not participating in criminal activity? Why are federal officers using civilian vehicles and taking people away in them? Are the arrests federal officers make legal under the Constitution? If so, how? After 7 p.m. Thursday, a DHS spokesperson responded, on background, that they could confirm Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf was in Portland during the day. The spokesperson didn't acknowledge the remaining questions. It's like stop and frisk meets Guantanamo Bay, said attorney Juan Chavez, director of the Civil Rights Project at the Oregon Justice Resource Center. Chavez has worked on litigation surrounding the weeks of protests and helped lead efforts to curb local police from using tear gas and munitions on protesters. He called the arrest by federal officers terrifying. You have laws regarding probable cause that can lead to arrests, he said. It sounds more like abduction. It sounds like they're kidnapping people off the streets. Ashley Albies, the civil rights attorney with the National Lawyers Guild, said Pettibone's detention is an example of intimidation by federal law enforcement and noted that people have a First Amendment right to demonstrate. She also said law enforcement officials have to follow procedures when they detain someone. I would be surprised to see that pulling up in an unmarked van, grabbing people off the street is an acceptable policy for a criminal investigation, Albies said. In a letter released Thursday, Asshole Wolf said, Portland has been under siege for 47 straight days by a violent mob, while local political leaders refuse to restore order to protect their city. We need to protect our city from the fucking feds, asshole. A federal courthouse is a symbol of justice, Wolf wrote, denigrating protests against racism in the United States criminal justice system as an angry mob. To attack it is to attack America. No, asshole, to attack the justice system is to attack the owners of the slaves. You're not going to be able to keep us down much longer. KOIN was first to report Thursday that Wolf was visiting Portland to view damage to the federal courthouse. This week, Trump has repeatedly spoken out about what he calls lawlessness in the city. He praised the role of federal law enforcement officers in Portland and alluded to increasing their presence in cities nationwide. Speaking to Fox News on Thursday, acting U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan called the protesters criminals. So it's up to us, dear viewers and listeners, to keep this fact straight. The criminals are the feds, and the criminals are the politicians who release the feds on their own people. Protesters are not criminals. The assholes who crack down on them are the criminals. I don't want to get ahead of the president and his announcement, Morgan said, but the Department of Justice is going to be involved in this. DHS is going to be involved in this, and we're really going to take a stand across the board, and we're going to do what needs to be done to protect the men and women of this country. You're going to do what needs to be done to protect the owners of this country and their paid stooges. Early Thursday morning, Portland police tried a new approach to stop the protests. Officers cleared Lounsdale and Chapman squares, including Riot Bibs, a barbecue stand that had been cooking free food since July 4th. The city said it was closing the parks for maintenance. By early afternoon, fences had been installed around both parks. Police arrested 9 people during the closure, including 3 of the people who ran Riot Ribs. They face a variety of charges, including trespassing and disorderly conduct. Mayor Ted Wheeler's office declined to offer comment on the latest events involving federal officers, but reiterated a statement from earlier in the week saying federal officers should be restricted to guarding federal property. We do not need or want their help, Wheeler said. The best thing they can do is stay inside their building or leave Portland altogether. Oregon Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley said if Wolf is coming to inflame the situation in Portland so the president can look tough, the acting DHS leader should leave. Federal forces shot an unarmed protester in the face, Merkley said in a tweet. These shadowy forces have been escalating, not preventing violence. Oregon Governor Kate Brown similarly called for federal law enforcement officers to leave Portland. She added, Wolf is on a mission to provoke confrontation for political purposes. This political theater from President Trump has nothing to do with public safety, Brown said in a statement. The president is failing to lead this nation. Now he is deploying federal officers to patrol the streets of Portland in a blatant abuse of power by the federal government. There are going to be lots of conversations about this around you. Some of your friends and neighbors are going to say that these rioters are criminals. They're going to say that protesting is bad. Only privileged people, only comfortable people can say these things. If you are truly standing in solidarity with the working poor, then you have to stand in solidarity with these protests. And you have to speak up about the feds getting involved in the way that they're getting involved now.